Should smart TVs be forced to give prominence to free-to-air channels?
And when will the government be brave enough to change the anti-siphoning sports broadcasting rules? Hey there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the award-winning podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading technology journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. I'm Adam Turner, and I'm joined as usual by Alex Kidman, a man who loves nothing more than to talk about sport. Alex, did you see that ludicrous display last night?
Look, I did. I was disgusted. Asuka was robbed. She absolutely should have beaten Bianca Belair, but I will still acknowledge Roman Reigns as my tribal chief.
Fair enough.
God damn it.
So, speaking of references that not everybody gets, we're joined once again by TV Blackbox's
Jesus.
Steve Molk. Steve,
Oh.
what obscure reference would you like to drop into this show?
One that isn't, well, it would only be obscure to Alex. I was gonna, at least you could have opened up with sort of how well St Kilda played against the Bombers on the weekend, but
I was happy
You
to see
know.
that.
Who?
yeah, I mean, sure. It's beyond comparison. We can go niche, friends, and then we can go way niche.
I'm sure there's at least 3 listeners out there who actually understood what I was talking about, just to be fair.
So
We'll
Steve
leave them to
thinks
it.
he's here to talk about TV and sport, but we actually intend to torture him in the green room later to get Mr. Squiggle's phone number so we can pull off this podcast that we've been talking about. But as we bide our time and lull Steve into a false sense of security, we'll be discussing plans to force smart TV makers to prioritize free-to-air content and also what's happening with the sports anti-siphoning list. But first, Alex, over to the rapid-fire vertical hold news desk.
So, our first rapid-fire news piece is actually something we touched on last week, which was TikTok bans going on around the world on government devices. The Australian government has leapt into the no TikTok on your federal government phone service story, I guess you'd call it. Adam, are you surprised at all?
Not really, because we tend to follow the crowd on anything to do with security. We're never going to stick our neck out. And we don't have to turn into a politics podcast, but everyone knows what I'm talking about, right? So, yeah, no, it doesn't really surprise me. It is interesting that they've drawn a distinction between if you're a public servant with a work-issued phone, it's not allowed to be on that. But if you've got your own phone in your other pocket, it is allowed to be on that. So that shows maybe what kind of risks they're worried about. But we'll then see down the track how far they want to go. Like if America turned around, which I don't think they would, and actually say, no TikTok for you, for everybody, I'd be interested to see if we'd do that.
Well, they're discussing it. Now, Steve, would
Yes.
the Australian government saying no TikTok for anybody affect you in any way?
Oh, look, if anything, it would probably make my life a little bit easier. You know,
Get you back a few hours.
Well, not even that I very occasionally scroll through it. This is possibly me showing my age. When I did dip my toe into TikTok, it took me a solid 3 weeks to work out that you could press and hold on a video and say, I don't want to see stuff like this, so that I stopped seeing half-naked women dancing on a screen in front of me endlessly because I was a 50-year-old male. That was the only reason I was getting it, as far as I could tell.
Well, speaking of weird and wacky legal maneuverings, as we just were, our new soup du jour, ChatGPT, is back in the headlines because
AKA assignment writer.
Well, the issue is the accuracy of the assignments that people are using to write with it, and specifically the fact that someone's launched a defamation case against
Oh
it
my God.
in Australia.
Please let it be like Lyle Shelton or something.
Yeah, who did it defame and how?
So it's the defamation action has been taken out by some lawyers on behalf of the Victorian mayor, where ChatGPT basically places this. I don't want to defame this mayor. I don't want to get sued.
Sure.
So I'm just basically going to say ChatGPT appears allegedly to perhaps, maybe putting as much legal covering on this as I possibly can, have alleged that this particular Victorian mayor, who I'm not going to name, was on the other side of a foreign bribery scandal, where in fact he was the whistleblower, and it's basically said, no, he was the briber.
Oh.
But the thing is, ChatGPT doesn't actually know anything. All it knows is what it's learned from everywhere else. So it only thinks that because something or someone told it that. Yes?
Well, yeah, but I don't know that not having a brain is actually a defence in Australian law.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Because if it was, a lot of people would be out scot-free. Yeah,
Mark
that's a
Latham
good
wouldn't
point.
be a senator in New South Wales.
We might have to cut that for legal reasons.
Oh, no, I'm happy to see him in court any day of the week.
Sticking with ChatGPT, I've got some good news for you, Adam, and I've got some bad news for you. I'll give you the good
hit me.
news first.
Yeah.
If you've ever lost a Windows activation key, good news, ChatGPT can generate one of them for you.
Oh, God.
Really? So it's been going through my office and finding that list that I printed out back in the 90s.
It's probably just
it's-
stolen somebody's volume license key.
It's funny that you should mention the 90s because you didn't let me get to the bad news.
Oh.
It can only generate keys for Windows 95.
Oh, that's a punishment in some
amazing.
countries, including this one.
That's amazing. David Green, who does the very excellent VHS review show on your social medias and those sorts of things, and what he does is he talks about an era in time going to his video library, and the biggest joy out of it is that he takes the ads from these video recordings and plays some of them, and you get to see, like an ad from Harvey Norman, as it was in this case. I think in 2002 he was showing us a television show from, and he shows this ad where they were selling ex-government laptops complete with Windows 95 in 2002.
So desirable.
I just can't even.
Well, speaking of just can't even, it seems we just can't even go a week without another leak. This time, it's one that doesn't affect Adam, but potentially does affect me and Steve. The Service New South Wales app had a data breach earlier in the week where for about 90 minutes, if you were accessing data on the web from it, you might have got someone else's details completely, their license, date of birth, the whole shebang.
Jeepers. I mean,
Steve, are we just doomed?
what was the government's MediHealth thing that they wanted us all to sign up to so that the doctors could see and we could choose to opt out of it?
It was my health record or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's it. And like I went, the government can't be trusted with our data as it was 5 years ago, and didn't take up that offer. And look, that has caused me some pain, but I've overcome it in each instance that it's happened. It's just inevitable, right? All government, the hacking of government services now is simply just inevitable.
Well, that's a cheerful picture. Speaking of inevitability, sadly, if you've ever used Book Depository, the alternate kind of arm of Amazon that sold actual books, you won't be able to for very much longer, with Amazon announcing that it's actually going to close Book Depository from the 26th of April. So not long now, in fact.
Jeez.
Steve, ever bought anything from Book Depository?
I think so. I'm sure I would have bought like a text or something for it, because I'm trying to not buy physical books as much as possible, which I appreciate limits my capacity to do things sometimes. But audiobooks and ebooks are just heaps easier to pack and move.
They weigh a lot less, it's true.
Heaps.
How about you, Adam?
I'm trying to what's the difference between buying a book from Book Depository and buying a book from Amazon?
One of them you're going to the Book Depository site, and one of them you're not. The big difference.
So why does Amazon own a Book Depository thing when Amazon wants to be the king of all booksellers?
Because it was a competitor.
Oh, way back in the day. All right, yeah, okay.
The big advantage for a lot of Australians for the longest time with Book Depository was the shipping.
Yeah.
Lots of other international booksellers would charge you a fortune because, as Steve's just said, books are heavy.
Yeah.
Book Depository did not. And they continued on. I mean, Amazon bought them like 2011, I think it was. They've owned them for a long time. But they've just sort of been this vestigial little arm of the company. And they've more or less just gone, nah.
I don't tend to buy, I don't buy a lot of books, but other people in my household do. But we tend to, like, my kids tend to get book vouchers for Christmas, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, whatever. So there's always them to spend to go to the shops.
Do you hate your kids?
No, I'm not the one who gives them to them. Other people know because they know how much my kids love books. But also, we do a run into town once or twice a year. Like, we'll go into readings in Carlton, and we have this system where we all go around and find a book or two that we like, chuck it in a bag, and forget we ever saw it. And that's a Christmas present or a birthday present, like a few months later. And then we go out for coffee because it's Carlton. So yeah, that's
Yes.
sort of our system. So I honestly don't buy books that often on online.
Okay, well, maybe you're at fault then.
Yeah,
And
Look at the
definitely me.
Victorian being all funky and
Well,
disconnected.
and drinking
I-
coffee.
Yeah, exactly. They won't sell me a coffee as I buy a book online, so stick it.
And look, finally, we come to that most venerable of Australian institutions, the chicken crimpy. Steve, are you a fan of the chicken crimpy?
Deeply and passionately.
So you'd probably be deeply and passionately in love with the idea of the Xbox Series S chicken crimpy.
Yes, whatever that is.
It's a chicken crimpy, and I'm not making this up. It is a chicken crimpy styled Xbox. I'll throw some pictures of this up on the Vertical Hold website for the
Amazing.
listeners.
Hang on, this
Amazing.
might be another north-south thing because I've never bloody heard of a chicken crimpy. Is this like a potato scallop? Because I've just
No.
Googled it.
No, this
And
is
when
an
I look for chicken
shaped
crimp,
biscuit.
well, that's the
Oh,
thing.
that's
When I
right.
look for chicken crimpies, I see arnott-shaped biscuits. So we call
That's-
that chicken in a biscuit, or is that a different brand?
That is a different brand. That's
Oh,
sanitarium, I
okay.
believe.
Yeah.
I'm very much
See, as a
mistaken.
guy who can't eat a lot of carbs, I don't really shop in that aisle anymore. So maybe they've come along since then.
No, they've been around for some time.
The thing that gets me about this particular thing is Xbox has done a ton of these incredibly specialized promotional consoles, and I had some horror flashbacks to an Xbox 360 promotion that they did. And Steve, you'll appreciate this one
Mm.
because somewhere out there in Australia, and if any of the listeners have this, I'd dearly love to know. Somewhere out there in Australia, there is or must be or should be an Xbox 360. So this is going back a while with Kerry Ann Kennelly's face painted on it.
What?
Ooh.
What?
I'm not making this up. This was a promotional thing that they auctioned for charity 10 plus years ago. I have been in the same room as that particular object. I have not been in the room with the chicken crimpy Xbox, however.
Did
I've just
someone do
looked
the-
at it in horror.
Charitable thing and then chuck the Xbox in a dumpster, set it on fire, and
I am
Again,
Fling
willing.
it
I feel
over
like the
rainbow.
lawyers might get involved here, so we
Wow.
might have to cut the news section short here just to save ourselves too many legal fees.
There has been nothing rapid fire about this news section.
no, it's I was
False
starting to
pretenses.
question the whole format at this point. So speaking of rules, the Australian government, Steve, has had a long and glorious history when it comes to sucking up to Australian free-to-air broadcasters and basically making
Yep.
up whatever bloody rules they can to protect basically 7, 9, and 10 against the world.
Yes.
And let's just be upfront because I've been sitting here bitterly writing notes angrily about this for this section, ready to rant. And I
Yes.
think, to be honest, part of the reason why I'm so dirty is that when digital's disruption came up to publishing and whacked it over the back of the head, nobody cared. When it
Mm.
came up to radio, nobody cared. But when it's trying to disrupt television, oh no, we can't have that. We have to protect our friends at 7, 9, and 10. Now they're talking about this crazy thing that's going to give them priority on smart TVs. How is this going to work?
Yeah, it's known within governmental circles as the prominence framework. And the basic premise is when you buy your smart TV today
Mhm.
and plug it in and turn it on and go to the apps screen, you may or may not, most likely won't have 7, 9, and 10's catch up services, 7 Plus, 9 Now, and 10 Play, respectively, and SBS On Demand and ABC iView pre-installed and lined up in the the menu to be able to function or to use. You have to go and get them, download them, all of those sorts of things. However, you are very likely to find a Netflix app, a Samsung app, and any of the other streaming services, a
Hey,
Prime Video
whoever's
or
cut
whatever.
a deal with the TV maker for
Whoever
some money.
has-
Yes, very much
And we
so.
are finding more and more as we buy our smart TVs that even on the remote, there is a Netflix button or a Prime Video button or a Disney Plus button, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yes, those services pay a reasonable amount of money per unit to make sure that they are featured prominently in that scenario. Free TV Australia, which is the lobby group that represents our commercial broadcasters, and by the way, SBS and the ABC are associate partners, so not directly represented, though have some interest in what free TV do, have been lobbying the government to change the legislation so that when you purchase your new smart TV, hypothetically in 2025, that 7 Plus, 9 Now, 10 Play, and even ABC iView and SBS On Demand would not only be pre-installed, but would feature as the first 3 to 5 apps in that menu when you open up the service to be able to access those things, bumping your Netflixes and whoever else out of the way. I'm getting the feeling, Adam, that you don't think that's a great idea.
I don't see why they deserve special treatment. I don't have a problem
Mhm.
with them being on there. I don't have a problem with them being pre-installed. But what is it that makes them so damn special when that they have to be above everything else?
What a great question to ask. If you were to approach Free TV Australia or even the represented channels, the networks, they would say to you, if we are not given prominence, because their catch up and BVOD services that are functioned through those apps are absolutely increasing in audience for them, and they're pouring a lot of money into that experience. If they don't have prominence on smart TVs, then the free to air broadcasting networks, as we know them in 10 years, will not exist.
Bullshit.
That is their.
Absolute bullshit.
And why do you think that, Adam?
Because they're full of crap. Because they'll do anything to try and
Great
protect
defense, Your
themselves.
Honor. It's bullshit because they're full of crap.
They're not being prioritized at the moment. They haven't been prioritized for
Correct.
how long? We'll say it's at least 10 years since
Let's be
we've
generous
had
and say 10. Yep.
Yeah, 10 years. We're talking smart TVs, we're talking Apple TV, set-top
Yes.
boxes, Google. They haven't been prioritized on any of them, yet they freely admit that their services are still growing. So if people want to watch their content, they will go and watch it. It doesn't matter if you put iView first or last. I will watch Bluey because it's great. So if they're
Correct.
managing to thrive and survive and do really well without this, it is absolute bullshit to say, oh, you need to do this special favor for us or we're going to disappear.
I think we might have just reached an important and incredible moment in the history of Vertical Hold here,
Yes.
because I'm going to agree with Adam.
I thought it was the most times I'd said bullshit in the time within 60 seconds, but yes, that is even more shocking.
So, I mean, look, there's part of my brain that says I don't care because honestly, and I know Adam will agree with this, the thing you buy a smart TV for is not the smart bit, it's the TV bit. Buy the best panel you can, chuck a streaming box or stick on there because they're more updatable, more configurable, a better experience all round. But the problem with this is that with modern smart TVs, you actually do still need to push them online for firmware updates, which can genuinely improve the experience. And that's the point where you realize, as I've recently done with a Samsung Smart TV, that they've snuck a Sky TV app onto the TV that I never even wanted there.
Those bastards.
And that's genuinely something where my brain says, no, give me a blank slate and let me pick. I mean, if it was up to me, honestly, it'd be blank slate, and those little Netflix and Disney and Prime buttons on the remotes would be programmable, so I could go, cool, well, I want to watch YouTube and iView, and I want to say that one's that one and that one's that one. I can't do that.
Well, and I appreciate the utopia that you're proposing, Alex. And we all know that
Meanwhile,
that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the commercial realities of broadcast television and streaming services, I want to, and without extending this whole episode into an hour-long pros and cons around the free-to-air television market in Australia, which we very easily could, I want to say that I both agree and disagree with you in this situation.
Have you thought of going into politics?
But, mate, I'm having a meeting with someone next week. The challenge that we face absolutely is that the free-to-air broadcasters have squandered their goodwill with predominantly the audience, and I would stretch it to say, especially the politicians, short of the lobbying dollar that they managed to throw around, by acting like it just entitled children.
Yep.
You know, they no longer pay license fees to broadcast when there used to be significant monies made off that spectrum.
Which is worth a lot of money, and they're living on it rent-free.
Absolutely. And trust me, Telstra, Vodafone and Optus, as our three major telcos in the country, would eat their young to get their hands on that. Plus any fourth player that might want to step up in the same kind of scope and so on and so forth. They would just eat it alive. The difficulty for the free-to-air networks is that they are absolutely coming off a diminishing base right now, where their traditional audience, people who are older than us, only ever have watched TV.
We're old, let's be honest here.
To a lesser degree, Alex, but yes. People older than us have always turned on their television, their black screen in its various forms, and watched whatever got spat at them at the time that it came out. Nowadays, more and more, their audience, and by that I mean people younger than me, especially my teenagers, and even younger than them, if they are tuning in to those services, they are going looking for the content that they want to watch. So Married at First Sight is a great example. It's just finished. It did gangbusters on Nine, and while it was doing massive money in its linear broadcast first run, it was also lifting anywhere between 50 to 75% in its catch up and VVOD numbers in the week following its broadcast on that episode. Now, if that doesn't send, and I know they all know about it, but if that doesn't send a shot across all of the broadcasters bow about taking BVOD particularly more seriously, then they need to pack up their stuff, put everything back in its boxes and send it back to the manufacturers and give up on being a TV network. They know their future is in digital and they are only just catching up. And so now they are scrambling to say, hang on, if we are not prominent in your smart TV service, and it's ostensibly smart TVs, but I can promise you it will not be only smart TVs. They will stretch the legislation to include all smart making devices, whether it's your plug-in USB device or your Apple TV or whatever it is. The things, they will all need to be pre-installed and preloaded, and it is not without precedence. Yes, other services have paid for it to be there. All that proves is that it can be done. So if you want to sell your product in our country, if this legislation passes, it needs to be this. It does open some questions. Of those 5 services, 7, 9, 10, ABC and SBS, if this legislation passes, who goes first?
Oh, that's a good one. We lock him in a room and let him fight it out.
Please, can we? That would be great.
Okay,
I'd pay to
I'm
watch
going to
that.
argue. I'm going to argue if we have to do it.
Yes,
and I take
which is
your
what
point,
they're
Steve,
proposing.
which is basically the networks are pretty slack and want more freebies. If we have to do it, let's do it in the old school channel order. If we're appealing to those old school audiences that otherwise aren't going to see them.
2, 3, 7, 9, 10.
And 28, yeah.
No, yeah, and 0.
Why 28?
Or
Yeah, 0 if you really want to
go
push
with
it.
0. Actually, channel 10 should be 0.
Well, and it is
Depends
1
how
and
old
10
school
now.
you want to go.
See, I was growing up in regional areas, and Channel 10 didn't come along till way later.
Yeah.
Oh, see, now all of a sudden we've muddied it, right? If we're going to include, so I'm in the position where I'm as old as Alex, let's say that, and who, frankly, there's a picture of him carved into the wall of a pyramid. Back when I was a young boy, that's right. When I was a young boy, I had a channel, the ABC, and our single regional broadcast network was 1045A. Now,
I'm going to pour one out for 9/8 television as it was that I had as a lad.
There's just no way any of that's going to work. So it opens that question. I think that's an easier solved one. If I flip to the other side, the reason why I agree with you. So if we don't do it, the free-to-air broadcast networks are saying that they're cooked. And they
lie.
Yeah, which I call bullshit on, because you just said
go on,
how well BVOD's doing without this.
Go on.
Yeah.
But it puts them in a position where they're behind the 8 ball and it's anti-competitive ostensibly. That's what they're trying to get at. The flip side, any one of those networks could go to your Samsungs or your LGs or your Sonys and front up the cash and get the app there right now. Right now. I know it would be a significant amount of money, and I know that Netflix, who are a global business in every country in the world bar 3, I think it is, lean on that as their mechanism as to why, hey, Sony, we think you should have a Netflix button, and we think we should only pay 20 cents per unit to have that button on your remote, and so on and so forth. We are a drop in the absolute ocean to Netflix by comparison, right? There's 27 million Australians, ostensibly at one time at night. 10 million people maybe are watching all of the media available to us, and that includes streaming services. Free-to-air networks at best are getting somewhere between 2 to 3.5 million viewers watching linear broadcast TV in their respective time zones at any one time, right? That's the absolute tippity-top numbers that come in that regard. Add in a few extra viewers and you probably get to 4 million at best if we're going to talk about who's watching BVOD catch up, those kinds of things. There is nothing stopping any of them going, hey, we'd like to have our app at number 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, preloaded.
Okay,
and
I'm going to challenge that bit, and I've actually just come up with an idea that I like for this prominence thing.
Sure.
Because I would counter-argue that 7, 9, and 10 all have relatively cashed-up owners.
Oh,
I mean,
Have you tried getting
Big
money out of Nine
oh,
lately?
yeah. I'm not
Or
saying you can
7.
get money out of them. I'm saying that they've got money, that they're very,
Yes.
very big businesses. So if the
They
Australian
are.
government is going to legislate in favour, it should legislate in favour of the national broadcasters. Say, hey, you've got to chuck ABC
Yes.
and SBS on demand. They're the ones who, quite legitimately do not have the same resources. Whether or not they want to spend them, yeah, that's a different matter.
Yep.
They do not have the same resources. They're the ones who I think are never going to go to those makers. Hey, here's the cash.
Yeah. It speaks to the real question that I'll hopefully paraphrase a little bit
Hmm.
better than Adam expressed it. Why should the government of our country representing us and not getting the proper amount of tax dollars out of them in the first place? But I digress on that. That's my sidebar. Why should the government of our country legislate to prop up what is looking to be an aging model of media and entertainment that now at least 2 or 3 generations of people do not engage with?
And not just that, but a medium that saw the writing on the wall for decades and has refused to do anything about it because they were
They are being
protected.
punished for that now, though. Like, I hear what you're saying, and in a
Punished with
legislative,
a
it's not
growing
about being
audience and money.
punitive.
Yeah,
I'd like to
but
be
it's not
punished
like
that
this
way.
problem has emerged overnight.
Sure, no, and I appreciate that. And the legislation isn't. It's not. They would argue it is punitive if they don't do it, and to suggest that it's punitive that if it is done to the it brings in some real questions around if who do you call those people, if this legislation goes through, is it fair then of a Netflix, Disney, Prime Video, whoever, to jump up and down and say this is any competitive behavior against us?
If they gave a shit about a small market like us, yes, it would be, because what everybody argues for is a level playing field, unless it's against
And
their
the
advantage.
full reality of a capitalist commercial society is that if you want it, pony up the dough.
There's one other thing here, and this is something that the government just does again and again when they
Mhm.
try to legislate for these things. They're totally missing the boat that technology is changing and making this irrelevant, because all of the hardware makers in the last few years have tried to deal with the fact that people get annoyed because of this fragmentation of content. I sit down and I want to find something to watch, and I'm expected to search through 10 different apps and dick around to find the show that I want. So they're all coming up with their own ways to have cross-platform search and cross-platform content discovery. And Fetch has been have done it recently. Fetch TV is putting out a new update for their interface, which makes it a lot easier to do this.
I
Where
agree.
it won't say when you turn it on, you're not looking at Netflix, Disney, iView, whatever. What you're looking at is the shows. And it doesn't matter where the shows are from, because people don't care where the shows are from. So you won't have to open the Netflix app or open the iView app. It'll just say, hey, you've been watching Bluey, and you've been watching Poker Face, and you've been
Yeah.
watching Scrambling to think of shows on different networks, Stranger Things, right? So at that point, no one's going to be looking at the menu that shows me where all the apps are. So it's irrelevant who's at the top. What will be on the front is what people actually
And
want to
I'm
watch.
right back to disagreeing with Adam all over
Okay,
again.
that didn't take long,
We're
did it?
back, people. We're back.
Yeah.
No, I don't disagree that that it's totally a thing, that this kind of content search is a thing, but content search only works when you're aware of programs. Content search only works
No, but
when you
content
are
discovery now
no,
as well.
but
They're
let me finish.
serving it up to you.
Let me finish. It also only works if you are subscribed to lots and lots of services. And what we are seeing at the moment is an awful lot of people going, well, hang on, all of these services are getting very expensive.
Yeah.
And they are jumping to just one service or maybe one or two services. At that point, it becomes far more valuable to the consumer. And I will say, this is what I do to say, I want to jump into a Netflix, I want to jump into a Stan, I want to jump into a Presto, because I have to mention Presto every time that
Pour one
Steve
out.
is on the show.
Yeah,
There, we got it out of
careful.
the way. But I want to jump into one service and just look at what's available to me. Because if
Oh,
you're telling me that, for example, Picard is on Amazon Prime, but I don't have Amazon Prime, that's worse than useless to me. That's annoying advertising.
yeah. The challenge is, ever since we, I don't know what the correct word is, so I'll call it this. Ever since we split everything up and pissed it back off to its owners and
Hmm.
allowed the owners to be able to run their own streaming services, um, this idea that our linear broadcast networks effectively gave us aggregation in that truest sense, long gone. History, right? And in fact, what we saw when Disney started to buy back or decide that they wanted to take back a whole bunch of things that they had license deals with, and they just cut other services and other places off. And if you want to get that stuff, it's only with us. And we'll see that with Doctor Who and all of the other things in the rest of the world when it starts to play out. It largely made the rest of the process redundant, and absolutely meant if you want to see stuff, you've got to have access to all of the things. Now, Patrick Delaney, who's the CEO of Foxtel, at their upfronts last year said the immediate future of the media industry, and he means television in that context, is re-aggregation. And the way Foxtel are delivering that to us is on your IQ, here are a whole bunch of apps that you can click on and go through to your thing. Or here's the show advertised in their tiles and sliders, not unlike the Fetch example that Adam was using. And if you want to watch it, you click on it and it takes you through to the service. The problem being, though, if you click on the latest Star Trek anything and you don't have a Paramount Plus subscription, the first thing you will see is that login screen where it says, do you want to sign up? And it's going to cost you $11 or whatever it is. In and of itself, that's not unreasonable because that's the model and function that we're under. The only way we're going to go back to any kind of magical, again, utopia where if I just want to watch it and see it is if you want to subscribe to like an Optus sub hub and they then are still taking whether it's 15 times 3 lots of monies because you subscribe to 3 services and all you get asked for is $45 a month. That's the only way it's going to function. And it only then works once you've signed into all of those services in all of the different ways anyway. Then the actual nature of the media industry will be this broken, piecemeal, horrendous delivery mechanism until, and let me tell you, nobody wants this, 1 or 2 companies own all of it.
Foxtel, cough, cough. Right back where we started.
Oh, mate, Warner Brothers Discovery, which is likely going to be bought out by something else in the next 18 months, which will add in a whole other bunch of arms of something else. I mean, Disney, other than Warner Brothers Discovery, Disney's probably the biggest media company in the world right now.
So they own HBO, yes?
Warner Brothers Discovery do, yes.
And there's been talk recently that they might be going out doing their own thing around here?
Oh, since Noah was a boy.
Yeah.
We've been, when's the HBO Max app coming to Australia? And look, while it is a fair question, without hearkening back too quickly to what we just talked about, how few people in this little island actually watch television, and is it worth their expense to land themselves here, build the infrastructure and deliver it to us just because we Antipodeans think that we deserve the access to it? Foxtel, to their great credit, in the last few, because they have the exclusive deal with Warner Brothers Discovery to deliver HBO content in Australia. And in the last few deals, they've made sure that they can do that via streaming mechanisms, which means things like Binge exist. Without that deal, they couldn't do it. Just recently, coming out for the Australian Grand Prix, a guy called James Gibbons, who is the head of Warner Brothers Discovery's Asia Pacific arm, has said that they, the company, have plans to push out whatever their new app. So not just HBO Max, whatever HBO Max becomes.
HBO Max Super Plus.
Under the Warner Brothers Discovery deal, because currently it's in America, it's HBO Max and Discovery Plus. They're looking at coming up with their super app, and you just subscribe to that and you get all of the things. They're planning to roll that out into Asia Pacific. Now, he was very explicit in his language, as he well should be, because we know that Foxtel just signed they're not talking about it. My understanding is that it is a 24-month deal that allows them to continue their exclusive HBO rights delivery mechanism.
That's not a long time in this world. It is
not a long time. And in part, that is because Warner Brothers Discovery are weighing up their options, and they're also trying to make themselves attractive to a bigger company to devour them. So if they have these deals in place, look at us. We've got all these great ostensibly output deals functioning. That means that we are a cash plus healthy company. We've got all these great relationships, yada, yada. Whereas ostensibly a HBO Max Discovery Plus app combo, that's a liability for us because we have to be responsible. We have to be responsible for building the app, maintaining the app, growing that subscriber base, advertising, commissioning all of the content explicitly for that as we do in the States. And when your HBO, ostensibly, and HBO Max is a smaller audience but growing, I will acknowledge, in the mainland United States and Canada, you have to start asking the question, which is the business? Is it my cable service, premium cable HBO, or my streaming service, HBO Max? Which of these services am I making this product for? And right now, they are still focusing heavily on their premium cable delivery service, and HBO Max gets it as a and then surprise benefit otherwise. They are still fighting the cable cutters in the US, and absolutely the streaming audience is rising. But because of the infrastructure that exists in the States and how they get their television and everything that makes up the history of how it functions, it's a growing business, but it's not their primary business. And if they were to launch into Australia, it would be their primary business here. And that is a small nugget of audience that could be argued they're cutting off their nose to spite their face when all they have to do is ask for another zero from Foxtel and extend their deal. And trust me, Foxtel are in a position where they cannot afford to not pay that extra zero.
Enjoying the show? That's great. Don't forget to subscribe, which you can do on every podcast platform you've ever heard of. Just search for Vertical Hold or go to our website, verticalhold.com.au, where we've got handy buttons for every single podcast platform.
So, Steve, for a long time, Australia's had this thing called the anti-siphoning list. It's
Yes.
basically a list of sports that must be shown on free-to-air television
Correct.
at all costs, like
All
the
times at
AFL
all
Grand
costs.
Final, the Melbourne
Oh.
Cup.
Not just the grand final, my friend, every game of AFL, including the final series.
But they don't show every game.
Yes.
Oh,
Wow.
that's right, because then they have to offer it, but then once they've got it, they can on-sell it to Foxtel if they want to, but they have to have first dibs on it or something?
If they basically renege their first right. So
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting, but absolutely
all right.
the legislation says every Olympic Games, summer opening and closing, every Winter Games, including opening and closing, all the Commonwealth Games, the Melbourne Cup, every match in the AFL Premiership season, including the finals, every match in the National Rugby League Premiership, every state of origin, every international where Australia is performing, so on and so forth. It is every game of everything.
So, in other words, they are surprisingly bending over backwards to protect free-to-air television.
And have done since all hail our former leader, Stephen Conroy, who established the list, because at that time there was some suggestion that one of these magical sports or part thereof was going to vanish exclusively to Foxtel at that stage.
So they keep talking about updating this list, and it's about to expire. Have they come out and said anything meaningful, or are they just too gutless to do anything about it? So they've kicked the can down the line.
Happy Television New Year, everyone, because it has indeed finished, and they have indeed given us a new anti-siphoning list after months of submissions sent through to the Minister for Communications and their office. The outcome was, nothing changed, and we'll actually keep reviewing it, and in 3 years' time, we'll let you know what the changes are. Because we changed government. And so the new Minister for Communications had to be brought up to speed and completely re-lobbied by all of the people that have put in their submissions as to what the changes should be. So the easiest course of action was to say, we are not going to change anything, and we will set the expiry on this one for 3 years. And then in 2026, we will give you whatever the new anti-siphoning list is. Now, you are right. The intention of the anti-siphoning list is absolutely to support, prop up, your words, the free-to-air television industry and make sure that every Australian has a right to see Australians competing at that highest level in their various codes and sports. That's the intention behind it. The reality is that it means then 7 with Foxtel, 9 with Foxtel for the AFL and NRL rights, respectively. Foxtel pay 2/3 of the monstrous money that they sign up for those broadcast rights, and they cannot play the grand final live, not even simulcast.
That I don't understand. The simulcast thing is crazy.
In part, it's because the legislation says it must be first run on free-to-air television. So the letter of the law says it must be there first. What happens in the negotiation is Foxtel go, well, we're paying the bulk of this, so we want to be able to show every game of the AFL season, and Channel 7 go, that's good, we can't show all of them. We want to show ones that you're playing at the same time. Great, well, we can simulcast it, we'll allow for that to happen. But when it comes to the big game, the money shot, that's ours, baby.
So, idiot question from the guy with no ball in the game. What does this mean for whoever's got the rights for these codes, which, as the listeners will know, I'm not that interested in?
Yep.
But what does this mean for their streaming apps? Can 7 or 9 or 10 or whoever has the grand finals of a given code show it on their streaming platforms? Or are they only obliged to do this first run business on their actual broadcastings? Do I still need an antenna, basically?
Yes with an if, no with a but. It depends on the nature of their current agreement. So, for example, Nine, Foxtel, and the NRL, I think, have just kicked off a new agreement cycle. And in the last agreement cycle, Nine made sure that they had the rights to broadcast, stream via Nine Now, the football games that they broadcast. Not all of them, just the games they broadcast. It also allows for Foxtel, who previously had it wrapped up in the agreement before, they were the only way, them were the only people that could stream via KO ostensibly or whatever they used for you to watch the NRL. And I think even before that, the NRL said, no, we'll retain those rights and Telstra will get them separately.
Telstra had their weird little
it was
screen
messy,
business,
right?
and
It
stuff.
was messy.
I was more thinking this anti-siphoning legislation.
Yes.
Does it say that it actually has to be free to air? Well, these days, of course, digital transmission, but free to air, I need an antenna on my house kind of thing. Or could I watch the grand final on my phone because I'm nowhere near my TV if it's on a streaming 7, 9 or 10 app?
Oh, look, it connects into another piece of legislation called the Broadcasting Services Act around whether or not we believe that first run is linear broadcast only or whether it's in all methods and forms. My limited understanding of that act is that it's actually the latter. It means in all methods or forms. To cover all of the bases around, but what about this new method of getting this thing directly streamed into my brain? Well, the act covers that instead of us having to amend it and re-legislate it. What it has meant, so Nine have got it and they are, and we see this right now, Nine can stream the NRL. And they make a big show of it when it comes to the State of Origin and the grand finals. They give you different angles and all sorts of stuff, and all of it counts to valuable eyeballs for the ratings for those games. In the current agreement that 7 have with the AFL, they cannot. So if you jump onto 7 Plus when the AFL Friday night game is on and you want to watch that game, you get a placeholder thing that says, why don't you watch something else?
Thank you very much.
Yeah. In the new agreement, the big 7-year agreement that Foxtel 7 and the AFL have just signed but doesn't start until 2025, hallelujah, Channel 7 can stream the games that they broadcast. So you will be able to tune into 7 Plus and watch on the go the Friday night game of the week if that's the team that you're interested in or you just want to watch it. But if you want to watch any other or all of the others, KO or Foxtel are your babies.
So let's jump forward, what do you say, 3 years, and assume
3 years, 36 months.
Someone is actually brave enough to change this list rather than gutlessly kicking it down the line again.
Yes.
What would it look like? Because we're not just talking about Foxtel, we're talking about Amazon, we're talking about Google, we're talking about Apple. Who wants a slice of the pie, and how could it look?
Yeah, everybody. I mean, Apple have already dived into sports in the States. There are some things that if you want to see it, don't even need an extra pass. If you subscribe to Apple TV Plus, you get access to a whole bunch of sport. Prime Video last year showed the Australian Swimming Championships. The only place to watch it was on Prime Video.
And I want to say a few years back they had NFL games at some point. Like
they certainly had one
yeah.
game a week.
Yeah.
And they're sniffing around. So that's two big ones. Netflix haven't showed any interest, in part because it's not really their core business, but will they? Look, if there's money to be made, they'll do it. Disney similarly, in part because their broadcasting arm in the American Broadcasting Corporation, the ABC over there, have had skin in the game when it comes to things like the NFL and those kinds of things that they want to be able to.
Don't they own ESPN?
They
Disney?
do also own that, but it's separate, like as in your over the air, over the top service like your ABC versus your ESPN, which is a cable service. So different services, and ESPN has an app and ABC doesn't. and all of those sorts of things. It's we need to
Messy.
try and keep America out of it. In
Sorry.
Australia, absolutely they're interested because they know that sport, particularly live sport, and all of the sports specified on the anti-siphoning list are big business in Australia. They are worth big bucks money. And if you can be the only place to go to watch the AFL hypothetically, whether it's Prime Video, whether it's Apple TV Plus or KO, whatever it is, and that's the only way you can watch it, then there will be an element of the audience that will be eternally upset because that's just un-Australian and I should be able to watch it on my whatevers. And I turn on my telly and why can't I see the footy? But also it means that they're paying their cash to join up to their thing. I mean, Stan are effectively showing us how it could work now with their extra $10 a month Stan Sports subscription, where if you want to see any of the rugby union, club, national, rugby sevens, all those sorts of things, you've got to have a Stan Sports up. And they're slowly adding in other codes into that. Now, they are not tier 1, dare I say, even tier 2 codes, but they're in there. And everybody, and I mean everybody, put submissions into the Minister for Comms about what the anti-siphoning list shouldn't include, how it should be included, whether or not streamers can buy into it. Because right now, or at least the previous anti-siphoning legislation, it was only an act of government, an intervention by the minister that meant that they couldn't swoop in and pay the most money to take those rights. You know, there was ostensibly at Prime Video sniffing around at the cricket and then starting to make some noises about maybe we throw some money at the AFL. Wasn't taken seriously, in part because they knew that it was just a legal minefield for them and they'd have to spend way more to make sure they got it, even if they won it. Plus, it's also a recognition that our market isn't totally ready for it yet. You know, while we, and as I said, people younger than us, we'll watch it on our tablet or stream it over our things at home. We don't need an antenna. We don't have an antenna. There are still a large portion of the market, funnily enough, who tend to be the people that have a lot of time that can call and write their local member and say, I used to be able to watch the footy on my TV and you're telling me I can't now. What's that about? I'm not voting for you jokes again.
Will that ever change? Because there are always going to be old people.
The answer is yes, absolutely, because the good thing about old people, Adam, is they die, and
They get replaced.
Spoiler.
By new spoiler.
Sorry, my spoiler policy is showing. They do get replaced, but they get replaced with old people with different concerns and worries and baggage. So, I mean, no surprises, I'm 50. In 3 years' time, I'll be 53. I still won't be real old, but I will be coming at it from an older person's view, where in the next 3 years, what we consume, how we consume it, and the way that we consume it won't radically change, but absolutely will continue to alter. Will I be happy to deal with that and function with that? I'm probably a bad example because I can handle that stuff. But even I'm finding my limits these days with some things where I go, I just don't care. I don't care about TikTok. The Chinese government can stick it up their nose sideways. But there are generations of people who engage in and use those kinds of services and all sorts of other things that if they become fans or want to engage in that sporting code, at the same time, if they don't, those codes are cooked. So the mega millions that they get now in their broadcasting deals are great as long as the audience is there. And if the audience are turning off linear broadcast television, they need other ways to deliver it. And if the anti-siphoning list doesn't allow it, then, I mean, there's just no way that the AFL not even will be able to be broadcast. It just can't continue. It is so intricately linked to sponsorship dollars because of how it's broadcast that if you take away its ability to earn that money, the code stops.
More gambling ads.
Oh, I just can't even. Don't even start me on that bullshit.
Well, that just about wraps up another episode of Vertical Hold. Thanks to Steve for making time this week to join us on the show.
It's a me, Molkio.
Well, Molkio, you now have to face the perilous journey to the castle to find your princess and the Vertical Hold 3 questions of doom. I will ask all 3 as usual, and you can answer them in any order you like, blah, 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 blah. Here we go. Where can people find your work online? Where can they find you on social media, such as it exists or might exist by the time people are listening to this? And our current big contentious question, If you had one piece of advice to give to Australian TV viewers, one tip or whatever it may be, what would it be?
Oh, great questions, Alex and Adam, and I appreciate the effort that you put into preparing them for every one of your guests. If you want to read about anything that I write about, tvblackbox.com.au is the place to go. That includes where we deliver the TV Blackbox podcast. It's on hiatus for the Easter non-ratings break, but it is returning. And also a little thing that I popped out earlier in the year, I revamped the TV Binge Box podcast. And while some of the recommendations now are not as current as they were, they're absolutely valid. So I recommend you check out TV Binge Box. You might find a show that you've missed that I may have recommended that you watch. And spoilers, there were even a couple that I went, don't go near them. They are horrendous. Those recommendations stand, friends. I'm at Steve Molk on anywhere that counts, or you can follow TV_Blackbox on Twitter. I'm at Molk, at oz.social on Mastodon. I'm occasionally on Twitter, not as much as I used to be. I'm more over on Mastodon if you want to stay in touch with my general ramblings and rantings. And what's the one piece of advice that I would offer the Australian TV people, or the people about watching Australian television? Don't be afraid to change. Whether it's a channel, whether it's your subscription to a service, all of them are a la carte. None of them lock you in anymore. Put your toe in the waters. Check out Flip Around, Flop Around. The power is in the consumer's hands these days. Now, you may find here's a service that I absolutely have to hold on to because it's giving me regular new shows into the library that I must. For me, something like Disney Plus. But whatever it is, find your thing and love it. And whatever it is that you love, keep watching it because the people that make those shows depend on your eyeballs to watch it.
Sound advice. And as always, you can catch us online at verticalhail.au on Twitter for as long as that lasts under the Molk-apocalypse. Under the Musk-apocalypse, I should say. I don't believe Steve's taken over Twitter, although I reckon if you made a decent offer, it might work. You can also find us on Instagram via the Vertical Hold Facebook page or at verticalhold.com.au.
And as usual, thanks everyone for dropping by and giving us a shot. Drop us a line. Let us know what you think about the show, what you love, what you hate, what you think we could do better in 2023. Dog bark. Without fail. Doesn't matter what time we record, what day we record. He's just like, he checks my calendar and goes, right, I'm on. Sorry, I'll be back in 10 minutes.
Door shut. Roof.
Yeah.